Welcome. If you're here, you've already done enough for one day. You've carried thoughts and lists and worries farther than you needed to. So, for now, set them down beside you. Feel the bed hold you. Feel your shoulders drop. In slowly, and out even slower. Again in and out. Good. Tonight, I'll light a small lantern. Its glass is warm and a little fogged from the sea air. Inside it, a flame the size of a hummingbird's heart. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It simply glows, and the night grows softer. There was once a quiet kingdom that forgot how to fall asleep. Its rooms were grand, its gardens wide, yet the nights felt crowded with thoughts. In the tallest room lived a king with a gentle face and heavy eyes. He was kind and he was tired. Every sunset, he climbed a spiral stair, and every evening, sleep stood a little farther away. One evening, a storyteller came to the palace. Not with trumpets, not with drums, just with a lantern held close to her chest. She bowed as the flame trembled. "I will not chase sleep," she said softly. "I'll invite it." She set the lantern on the windowsill where the moon could see it and the city could feel it. And when she began, her voice was low enough to be mistaken for breathing. "This is the story of Layla," she said, "a mapmaker who drew rivers that calmed storms, and streets that remembered the way home, and stars that took their time. Layla lived in a riverside city that woke early and slept late. By day, she sketched bridges and harbors, markets and wells. By night, she traced the sky. Her hands were steady. Her lines were gentle. Her maps were not just of places, but of peace. On the night our story begins, the river was a long, slow silver. The moon draped it like a ribbon. Lanterns floated in bowls made of orange peels, each carrying a wish no louder than a breath. Layla watched them drift from her window, one elbow on the sill, one cheek in her palm, and a smile that only appeared when the city was quiet enough to notice. On her desk, between a compass and a cup of mint tea, sat an old brass lantern. It had belonged to her grandmother, and to her grandmother before that. Layla didn't light it often. Felt like a promise, not a tool. But that night, her eyes were heavy, her thoughts were busy, and the river whispered that it was time. She struck a match. The flame rose with a soft, cotton sound. A warm oval slipped across the walls. The room looked like a memory. Familiar, simpler, kind. From the lantern came a very small voice. It said, like a person sinking into a comfortable chair. Finally, Layla blinked. "Hello? Hello?" said the voice, and a glow shaped itself like a curl of smoke, then like a thread, then shyness turning to courage, like a tiny person no bigger than her thumb. A genie, but not the kind you bargain with, the kind you befriend. "I'm called Sable," it said. "My job isn't to grant wild wishes. My job is to make room for the wishes you already have, the ones that sit quietly and wait for you to notice them." Layla set down her cup. "What do I owe you, Sable?" "Only your slowest breath," the genie said, smiling, "and perhaps a story or two along the way." They sat together a while, saying nothing. Outside, a boat clicked gently against its mooring post. A couple laughed, far enough away to sound like wind bells. Somewhere, a cat decided not to argue, and the night grew softer. Sable lifted a tiny hand. "Would you like a map that knows when to rest?" it asked. Layla nodded. The genie opened the lantern's little door and drew out 3 small things. A paper compass that never pointed north, a silver pin, and a blue thread almost too fine to see. "This compass points to quiet," Sable said. "It doesn't care about directions. It turns toward the place your heart finds ease." "And the pin?" Layla asked. "To mark the moments that matter," said Sable. "You'll feel it warm in your fingers when a moment is trying to be noticed." "And the thread?" "A path you can pick up and put down. Follow it and you'll return to yourself gently." Layla set the compass in her palm. It spun once, like a dancer checking the room, and settled. Not toward the mountains, not toward the sea, but toward the river at dusk. "Shall we?" Sable said. They stepped into the hallway, then into the street where lamps wore small halos. The river welcomed them with a hush only water knows. A fisherman in a wool cap sat on the low steps, his line asleep in the water. Next to him, a brass pot steamed very slightly, smelling faintly of cinnamon. The fisherman looked up and nodded the way river people do, with the eyes first, then the chin, then the heart. "No hurry tonight," he said. "Fish are dreams with fins. They come when you stop asking." Layla sat one step above him. Sable, barely a whisper, nested in the crook of her wrist. "What's in the pot?" Layla asked. "Tea," he said, "but it tells stories if you listen." He poured a small cup and set it near Layla's knees, so the steam would warm her hands. "Today," he said, "I remembered to leave room in my day." Funny thing, the day used the room. He told her about the tides that kept time like a slow drum, and about a seal that bobbed up to blink at him for exactly 5 seconds, and about a gull that took a small shell and placed it, like a gift, near his boot. As he spoke, the silver pin in Layla's pocket grew warm. She pressed it gently into a fold of her map, not to claim the river, but to thank it. The compass hummed in her palm, pleased, and the night grew softer. Sable leaned close. "Sometimes the story we need is the simplest one," it whispered. "The story of a person who decided not to hurry." Layla closed her eyes a moment. A breeze patted past like a well-fed cat. The lantern flame inside the brass heart gave one small nod, as if agreeing. Across the water, the market was finishing its day. Stalls were closing like eyelids. Bells on a spice seller's awning chimed 3 times, then rested. The compass turned its face toward that sound, not urgent, just curious. They walked along the quay, past the bakery that dusted its threshold with flour, past the peach seller who arranged his fruit in rows of soft suns, past a child tracing a moon with her fingertip across a fogged window. The market at dusk is a kind of lullaby. Colors dim to kindness. Voices choose shorter words. Even coins sound sleepy in their bowls. Near the square, an old woman sat behind 3 apples. They were not the brightest apples, nor the biggest, but each held a little pool of evening inside its skin. 3 apples of the late hour, she said. One for a memory, one for a forgiveness, and one for a rest. Layla paused. Sable hovered, curious. "How do we choose?" Layla asked. "You don't," the woman said, smiling. "They choose when you're ready." As Layla watched, the first apple rolled a finger's width forward. "It's for the memory you've been carrying like a stone," the woman said. "You don't need to throw it away. You only need to set it down where the river can see it." Layla thought of a map she never finished, a promise she thought she broke, even though no one asked her to keep it as tightly as she did. She placed the apple gently into her satchel. The pin warmed again. The second apple tipped its stem toward her. "This one is for a forgiveness you owe yourself," the woman said. "For the times you were only human and forgot to be perfect." Layla smiled in that way we smile when we're seen in a kind light. She cradled the apple, felt its cool curve, and let her jaw unclench. Somewhere, a door closed softly. Somewhere, a bird decided not to sing. And the night grew softer. The third apple didn't move. It simply waited. "Rest asks nothing," the woman said. "It meets you where you are." Layla thanked her and left 1 coin, then added another. "One for the apples," she said, "and one for the kindness." "Kindness is its own coin," the woman said. "But I'll take the jingle. It soothes my cat." They laughed quietly. Sable tucked the blue thread through the satchel's loop, so the apples could find their way into the story later. They wandered deeper into the market. A tailor hummed while unthreading his needle. A bookseller leaned his head against a stack and let the paper sigh. A drummer placed a cloth over his drum so the skin could rest. Above them, the first stars opened, not all at once, but one at a time, like people arriving early to a gentle party and taking off their shoes at the door. Layla lifted the compass. It turned toward the edge of the city, where the streets loosened and the dunes began. The genie nodded. "Sometimes quiet is wider than water," Sable said, "and the desert keeps the longest stories." They followed a path that plaited itself between low stone walls, past the last house with the blue door, past a gate that chose not to creak, past a tree that sent them with a branch-tip blessing. At the caravan ground, Camels stood like soft hills that had decided to breathe. Wind chimes hung from a rope between two posts, the bells wrapped in cloth so they whispered instead of sang. A woman with a red scarf poured tea the color of late sunlight. She didn't ask where Layla was going. She only refilled the cup when it was empty. Sable perched on the rim and warmed its hands. "We're not in a hurry," it said, mostly to itself. Layla smiled. The map at her side felt a little heavier in the best way. Ink and intention settling where they belonged. A caravan leader approached, an old man with soft eyes and a beard like a well-tended garden. He bowed as if to a neighbor he'd known all his life. "We leave when the stars say we can see without trying," he said. "Just far enough to learn the night's first lesson." "What lesson is that?" Layla asked. "That every sound, even the quiet ones, has a place to be heard." They walked beside the camels as the sky turned the color of a plum just before it gives. Footprints softened back into the sand as soon as they made them. The city behind them did not disappear. It simply put on its night clothes and rested. Layla looked up. The stars were not scattered. They were arranged like thoughtful notes on a long letter. She traced the line between two familiar ones, the small one that looks like a tear, and the larger one that looks like the promise after it. Sable hummed a line that might have been a lullaby. The wind chimes answered in their rapt voices, and the night grew softer. "Tell me about your lantern," Layla said after a while. "Feels older than light." Sable thought, pleased to be asked. It was first lit for a child who was afraid of the dark. Not because the dark is unkind, but because the child didn't know yet that darkness can be a blanket. The lantern taught the child to breathe, and it learned to go wherever breathing was needed. Layla listened. The desert listened too. Somewhere far off, a fox made a choice and changed its mind, and no one was troubled by it. "What about you?" Sable asked. "What story do you need?" Layla touched the satchel where the apples rested. "I think I need a story that lets me put things down," she said. "A story that says it's okay not to finish everything. A story that trusts me to return." "Then the compass points true," Sable said. "It points to the next quiet." They walked until the dunes shaped themselves into gates, until the air felt cooler and kinder, until the sky lifted another inch. The caravan stopped. The leader raised a palm. "This is far enough for the first lesson," he said. "Here, the sand remembers the ocean. Here, you can hear waves that aren't there." Layla closed her eyes. There it was, a slow wash, a patient pull, the long-ago memory of water speaking through stone. She felt her ribs open the way doors open when someone knocks softly. In and out. The apples settled. The pin cooled. The thread lay across her palm like a sleeping path. Sable's voice lowered until it was nearly the sound of her own breath. "Not every wish needs sound," it murmured. "Some wishes grow in the hush." The storyteller's lantern in the palace window flickered, very gently, as if it had heard. The king's shoulders loosened under his robe. He did not notice it happening, which is the nicest way for a good thing to happen. Layla lay back on a carpet woven with constellations that only appear when you stop looking for them. Sable rested near her collarbone, warm as a pocket. The caravan bells made a promise to be quiet. And the night, the good, wide, forgiving night, grew softer. The desert held them a while longer. Sand cooling, stars unblinking, breath easy. When they rose, it was without rush. Layla gathered the blue thread. Sable smoothed a warm palm across the lantern's glass. The caravan leader bowed with his eyes. "Go where you can hear yourself," he said, "and walk as if the ground were glad." The compass waited in Layla's hand. It did not point north. It did not point away. It turned like a cat circling a cushion, then faced the river. Back to the slow silver. Back to dusk that lingers even at night. They followed a path that had been a path for a very long time. Low walls, quiet gates, blue doors breathing out the day. The city met them softly, without the clatter of welcomes. A lamp nodded, curtain approved. A rooftop slept in place. At the quay, the fisherman still sat with his brass pot. Steam rose like a small, steady promise. He looked up and smiled with the mouth first, then the eyes, then the shoulders. "Good," he said. "You didn't hurry. Layla sat on the step below him, sable curled in her sleeve. The river thickened the moon into a coin and spent it again, and again, and again. What did the desert teach you? The fisherman asked. That not moving can be a kind of moving, Layla said, and that sand remembers water. He nodded, pleased with the answer that belonged to her and not to anyone else. Have some tea, he said. He poured without looking, the way a man pours when his hands trust the cup. Tells small stories. We listen or we don't. The tea doesn't mind, but it's happier when we do. Layla wrapped both hands around the cup. Warmth spread across her knuckles. The steam opened her face like a window that chose the breeze. She breathed in. Mint. Cinnamon. A hint of orange peel from the lantern bowls drifting by. She breathed out. Slow. Lower. Quieter still. The compass, the fisherman said, nodding at the paper circle in her palm. Do you know how it works? Points to quiet, Layla said. It does, he agreed. But quiet is a wild creature. If you chase it, it hides. So you don't ask the needle to move. You ask your ribs to move, in and out like tide. Then you watch how the needle answers your breath. He set his own palm beside hers, not touching, only close enough to share the day's warmth. Try, he said. Layla inhaled the way the river inhales, wide, patient, unafraid of being seen. The needle trembled. She exhaled longer than her body expected, and longer again until the thought of trying softened into the act of being. The needle turned, slower than a leaf turning in a shallow eddy, and settled toward a stretch of water near the stairs, where reeds drew lines like careful handwriting. There, the fisherman whispered, pocket of quiet. It's not grand. It's true. He dipped a wooden cup into the river, not to drink, but to listen to the shape the water made when it returned to itself. A small hush, pleasing hush, a hush that says, you're allowed to be here. Sable leaned from the sleeve and nodded, pleased. Gifts like this aren't to be kept in drawers, it murmured. They want to be used until they feel like part of your hands. The fisherman tapped the brass pot with his knuckle. A round, gentle note. Years ago, he said, I kept a net that never missed. I could empty the river by noon. People clapped. I slept poorly. He smiled at his own foolishness as if it had been a neighbor he'd finally learned to greet. So I traded the heavy net for a lighter one that sometimes let the fish decide. And the nights came back. Not all at once. One by one. A little like stars. Layla set the silver pin against the map's edge, not to claim the fisherman's lesson, but to thank it. The pin warmed and cooled, as if taking a slow breath of its own. A moth touched the lantern and thought better of it. A boat's rope rubbed wood, barely. Or bumped a post with a sound like a polite knock from a tired friend. And the night grew softer. From the market street, a single bell rang and did not ring again. Not a call. Closing. The compass inclined its face in that direction, curious but not insistent. We'll go, Layla said. In a moment, Sable whispered, let the river finish saying what it was saying. They waited without counting. Waiting here was a kind of listening. The fisherman poured another cup, just to watch the steam write a sentence whose letters no one needed to read. When the sentence ended, they rose. Take this, the fisherman said, and he drew a small reed tube from the inside of his coat. It looks like a flute, but it makes almost no sound. Almost. Place it between your fingers when the world feels loud. It will give you a thread of breath to follow back to yourself. Layla held it to the lantern's glow. No varniz, no carving, just a reed hollow and honest. Thank you, she said. Thank the river, he replied, smiling. I grew the reed. I only decided not to ignore it. She placed the reed beside the compass. The two objects shared the same space the way two quiet people share a bench. Not competing, completing. They walked along the bank where the water lapped at steps made smooth by years of shoes and bare feet. Cloth hung to dry over a line. Its edges moved like a hand reassuring a child who didn't need much convincing. A cat, full of bakery crumbs and attention, inspected Sable with professional curiosity and then declared the inspection complete by blinking once. Do you ever tell noisy stories? Layla asked, half teasing. Sable smiled, small and sure. I don't mind noise, it said. I mind hurry. A loud wave can be calming when it knows where to fall. It turned its head toward the open square. Come see how the evening closes itself. They reached the market as the day folded away its corners. A spice seller tied his awning with a knot he had known since he was a boy. The knot remembered him and closed with a soft click. A baker swept flour into a neat drift and covered it with a cloth, the way some people cover the sleeping of the very young. A calligrapher blew gently across fresh ink until the gloss became matte and the words had weight. The compass did not spin. It rocked and steadied toward a corner where a woman in blue stacked small bells into a wooden tray. She was not in a hurry to finish. Each bell kissed the wood and stayed. She ran a fingertip along the handles as if thanking them for a day of honest sound. Layla stopped to watch. Dimming bells, Sable whispered. Not silent. Less. Enough. The woman glanced up. Looking for quiet? She asked, voice like wool. We're finding it, Layla said. Good, the woman replied. Most people try to buy it. She tilted a bell. Aside. Not a ring. An exhale. If you like, take one that has learned the end of a day. Layla tested a bell. It didn't try to impress her. It knew when to be a bell and when to be a circle of metal doing nothing at all. She placed a coin, then a second coin, then decided to add a third for the way the woman's hands moved without fuss. Too much, the woman said, but she didn't push the coins back. Some nights are heavier. Let this one be light. As they walked, the compass leaned toward a fountain you could miss if you didn't let the square be small enough. A stone bowl, a thread of water, not a display. Kindness. Layla cupped her hand and lifted a sip toward her lips. Cool. Clean. For a moment, the city was only this. The shape of stone, the weight of water, the simple fact of thirst answered. Tell me another tea story, Layla said as they circled back toward the river. Sable lifted an eyebrow. The fisherman told one. Layla added, I'd like one from you. Sable thought. I met a courier who ran messages until nothing was left of the messages except the corners. It said. He drank strong tea and swallowed his hurry with it. One night he put the cup down and watched the surface settle. He saw his face become less like a blade and more like a loaf of bread. The next day he delivered fewer messages, and more of them arrived. Layla laughed softly, the kind of laugh that doesn't disturb sleeping birds. I'll try to be bread, she said. You already are, Sable replied. Still warm. They reached the fisherman again in time to see him blow out a tiny flame under the brass pot. He tapped the side, the note lower now. Time to let the water sleep, he said. Come back when you forget how. I'll remind you. Layla touched the reed in her pocket. The compass in her hand felt weightless. The blue thread looped itself once around her finger and then tucked into the satchel like a well-trained pet. They took the stairs one slow step at a time. The city opened into a rooftop view without trying to be grand. Laundry lines traced a soft horizon. A shawl caught a private breeze. A distant window framed someone pouring a last cup. Even the moon seemed to balance itself on something quiet. Sable set the lantern on a cool tile. Let's try the reed, it said. Not to make music, to make room. Layla placed the reed between her fingers. She breathed in through her nose and out through the reed, longer still. The sound was barely there. A thread, a line drawn with air. Her shoulders fell another small distance. The corners of her mind rounded off. Again, Sable whispered. She did. The second breath felt like a key finding its lock. The third found a door that opened by being next to it. The fourth didn't need numbers. The lantern's flame listened and grew gentle to keep her company. The city listened and left her alone in the best way. The river, below, kept moving at the speed of kindness. And the night grew softer. Tell me what you're mapping now, Sable said after a quiet that felt like a gift unwrapped very slowly. Not streets, Layla said. Not yet. Tonight I'm mapping what happens when I stop trying to hold everything. I'm drawing a path that only appears when the pen is resting. A map of enough. Sable nodded as if it had been hoping she would say that out loud. Tomorrow we'll ask, it said. Tonight let's. They watched the distant fisherman tie 2 knots and then untie one, because he liked the number even. They watched the bell woman cover her tray with a piece of soft fabric that carried the smell of lavender from some summer day still trapped in the weave. They watched shadows learn patience on a wall. In the palace, the storyteller's voice crossed a long room and settled near a crown that had been set down on a table instead of a head. The king's eyes blinked slower. His breath found a steady lane. He didn't notice the moment his hand relaxed. He didn't have to. Layla lay back on the rooftop rug. The stars above the river were different than the stars above the dunes, but they knew one another. Old friends, new jokes, quiet laughter. Do you think the compass will always point to easy places? Layla asked. No, Sable said. It will point to true places. Sometimes true is quiet. Sometimes true is a hard question asked kindly. Either way, it points to where you can breathe. Layla listened to that and let it rest beside her. She didn't try to solve it. She let it be a stone on the riverbed, shaping the water without making a scene. A gust wandered through the alley, changed its mind, and wandered back out. A clock somewhere decided not to count this minute. A dog dreamed and moved its paws as if running in a field wide enough for everyone. Before we go to the bells and the market's last light, Sable said, choose one small promise for yourself. Layla closed her eyes. The reed was warm in her fingers. I promise to leave one space empty on every map, she said. Not a mistake. A meadow. For rest. Good, Sable whispered. Some maps save us. Some save room for us. It lifted the lantern. Shall we walk? They rose together, down the stairs, past the window that looked like a thought that had decided to stay, onto the street where the stones had cooled and the day's stories had settled into a low hum. At the corner, the compass raised its paper chin toward the market once more, where the last few stalls stood like books left open to the right page. The bells waited under their cloth. The fountain whispered a final sentence and then went quiet. The sky pressed its palm against the roofs in a gesture of blessing. They stepped into the square's soft center, where night gathers itself before moving on. Sable dimmed the lantern a thumb width. The shadows thanked it. The moth found a different light, and the night, good, patient, steady, grew softer. We'll close the market gently in the next walk. For now, feel how the river carries the city without effort. Feel how your body carries you without asking to be convinced. Notice the weight of your hands. Notice the way your mouth unclenches when no one needs anything from you. In through the nose, out through the reed in your mind. Again, slower, lower. Enough. The lantern agrees. The compass rests. The apples wait without worry. The bells under cloth dream of not ringing. And the night grows softer. The square was a held breath. Shops half closed. Lamps dimmed to kindness. Air like warm linen. Layla stood at the center and let the scene arrange itself around her. No pose. No plan. Just standing. Sable lowered the lantern another finger width until the flame made a small golden circle that did not need to be larger. The market knows how to end, the genie said. It learned from the river. The compass rested in Layla's palm. The needle did not hurry to choose. It leaned a degree to the left, as if nodding toward a narrow lane of woven shadows and spice. They entered the lane. Dates and figs slept in bowls. A cloth shop breathed out the day's dye and kept the color to itself. A glassmaker's window held its breath so the world could pass without a rattle. At the end of the lane, a stall sat like a memory that hadn't decided whether to be sweet or useful. A sign hung crooked by design. Stories traded here. Underneath, in smaller writing, noise accepted, hush given. The stall keeper looked like an uncle in every family. Eyes ready to be amused, hands that had learned gentleness by touching breakable things. He wore a vest with pockets that didn't clatter. On the counter sat a shallow tray filled with small tokens. Buttons, bottle caps, a single marble, a brass key that didn't belong to any door in the market. Evening, he said, as if the word were a soft fruit he wanted to hand to them. Do you need a hush or two? Maybe one, Layla answered, smiling. What do you ask in return? Your loudest thing, he said simply, not the world's. Yours. He gestured to a lidded jar at the corner of the counter. On the glass someone had written, noise. Inside, nothing was visible, and yet the jar looked a little heavy. Sable hovered, curious but not skeptical. Layla reached into her satchel and touched the apples. Memory, forgiveness, rest. They were quiet. She touched the reed, also quiet. Her fingers found the silver pin, now cool as moonlight. She closed her hand around something else instead. A knot in her chest she had carried for a long time. It wasn't an object. It wasn't even a story. It was the urge to answer every question perfectly and quickly. She set that urge on the counter, invisible, and nodded at the jar. The stall keeper opened the lid with both hands, like a prayer. The urge slipped into the glass without making a sound, which felt appropriate. He closed the lid and added the jar to a neat row of other jars that were also empty-looking and quietly heavy. "Thank you," he said, as if she had given him a loaf of bread still warm. He reached into a drawer and brought out a small cloth envelope tied with twine. He set it on the counter and patted it with the palm, not the fingers. "What is it?" Layla asked. "A hush long enough to sleep through a thunderstorm, and short enough to hear your name if love calls," he said. "It's reusable. Do not wash. Do not explain." Layla slid the envelope into her satchel. Warmth spread along her ribs, the way light spreads under a door at night, when someone who loves you checks the hallway and decides to let you be. "And if I need more?" she asked. "Then you will have learned where to place your noise," he said, smiling. "Bring me what no longer needs to speak. I'll give you what knows when not to." Sable set the lantern on the counter. The stall keeper leaned to admire it, not greedy, simply appreciative the way one musician is with another's instrument. "Good flame," he murmured. "Knows the size of the room." The compass tugged at Layla's wrist. Not sharp, a suggestion. It turned toward a set of steps behind the stall, where the market dipped into a small courtyard most people missed unless they had finished their errands and forgetfulness at the same time. They went down. A fig tree drew a lace of shadows on the stone. A low fountain whispered to itself in a voice too small to be a performance. On a bench slept a dog the color of cinnamon, paws twitching as if chasing a comfortable dream. 3 lamps hung from a line, each dimmed to half a thought. The courtyard felt like an inside pocket sewn into the coat of the night. Layla sat. Sable perched on the fountain's edge and listened as if the water were about to tell a private joke. The compass lay face up beside her. The needle did not point anywhere. It rested. Sometimes that is pointing, too. One of the apples rolled gently in the satchel. The apple of memory. Layla took it out and turned it in her hands. It wasn't trying to be read. It wasn't trying to be anything. It was an apple at evening. Modest, steady, edible. "What does it want?" she asked. "To be seen without being judged," Sable said. "And then to be eaten. Memories are food when we chew them slowly. Stones when we try to swallow them whole." Layla smiled at the way truth can show up without boots on. She lifted the apple to her lips and took a quiet bite. The sound was round and soft. The taste was exactly as sweet as she had earned today and not a bit more. She chewed. She did not hurry to swallow. She let the memory lose its edges. She set the cord gently beside her, a small, clean ending. The cinnamon dog woke, yawned without apology, and came to sit at her feet as if guarding the space around her thoughts. Sable dipped a fingertip into the fountain and drew a circle on the stone, which held the water a moment longer because it understood the point. "Do you see how the market closes?" the genie asked, not with a shout, with a list of small endings done well. Layla nodded. She watched the lamp light lean and come back again. The stall keeper climbed down the steps carrying the noise jar, not to offer it, not to show it off, only to place it on the ground and sit next to it like a person sits beside an old friend who is finally quiet. "I saved them for a while," he said, noticing her glance. "Not because I need them, because some people come back and ask to hear what they tried to throw away. I let them listen, then I ask if they still want it." He smiled, a crinkle at one corner. "Most leave lighter." Layla felt the silver pin warm again, just enough to let her know a moment had asked to be marked. She placed the pin in the margin of her map. A small dot, a small word, courtyard. That was all the map needed here. The second apple, forgiveness, tipped inside the satchel. Layla took it out, placed it on her knee. It was cool, evening cool. She breathed in, out, and asked it nothing. After a time, the apple seemed satisfied and waited for another night. Not everything is for today. Not everything needs to finish. A bell in the square gave one last breath of metal and slept. The compass turned the very smallest degree toward the stair that would carry them back up. Before we go, Sable said, a lantern lesson. Layla leaned, chin on palm, the way children listen to the grandparents who never had to raise their voice to be obeyed. Sable cupped the flame without touching it. Not every wish needs sound, it said. You can wish by placing your hand on the table and letting it be heavy. You can wish by loosening your jaw. You can wish by walking slower past the thing you love. The lantern hears all of those and answers at the speed of kindness. The fountain agreed in the only way it knew, by not changing. The dog closed its eyes and moved from guarding to sleeping, which is a braver kind of guarding. The stall-keeper stood, took the noise jar and carried it back up the stairs, the weight a little less, the glass a little more itself. Layla rose. The apple of rest remained in the satchel, calm as a small moon in a pocket. The reed in her sleeve felt like a secret handshake with her own lungs. The compass warmed like a friend's hand. They climbed. The market now wore its night face. Fewer edges, longer shadows, a softness that teaches you how to walk without needing to be taught. As they passed the bellseller's stall, the woman in blue raised a palm in greeting. Her tray was covered, her day done, her shoulders answering to a lighter gravity. Sleep well, she said, which in markets like this is also a kind of blessing. You too, Layla replied, meaning it. They turned toward the river. A child counted stars incorrectly and was right anyway. A cat negotiated a corner with the confidence of someone who knows they are loved by many shopkeepers. A window reflected the lantern and made it look like two lanterns, which pleased the flame and made it stand a little taller. At the quay, the fisherman had gone home. A neat coil of rope where his boat had been. A circle worn smooth on the step where his pot had rested. The river made its endless gentle offers and accepted its endless gentle refusals. Layla stood, one hand on the rail, and let her eyes travel without looking for anything. Walk or water? Sable asked. Neither, Layla said. Stand. They did. And because standing can be a kind of prayer when done with both feet and no words, the night obliged. A breeze wandered through and decided to stay a minute. The lantern's glass fogged a little and cleared. Layla's breath matched the water without trying. After a time, the compass tilted toward the road that led to the caravan ground. The stars over the dunes would be beginning their slow chorus. Somewhere beyond the first ridge, a camel bell would be promising to keep quiet and doing a decent job of it. Back to the sand, Layla said, not because the river had failed, but because it had succeeded and could be allowed to rest. They walked, past the bakery whose oven breathed low embers, past the brooms leaning like old men telling street corner jokes, past the door with the blue paint worn where hands have loved it for years. At the city's edge, the gate remembered them and did not creak. The night widened. The dunes lifted their patient shoulders. The first steps into sand felt like the body remembering how to be held by something that gives and gives back. They reached the caravan post. Wind chimes whispered from inside their cloth wraps, saying just enough to prove they were present and then stopping in case anyone was trying to fall asleep. A young herder waved, then remembered it was night and waved smaller. The old leader sat with a lamp the size of a plum and a smile the size of a meadow. How was the market's ending? He asked. Kind, Layla said. Traded my noise for a hush I can keep. Good market, he said. Good trade. He poured tea that had been instructed to be quiet. They drank it without arguments. The tea, happy to be understood, tasted like a walk taken at the right speed. The apples settled. The reed warmed. The compass rested on the rug between them the way a cat rests on a book you are not reading at the moment. Choose a star, Sable said softly. Not a bright one. An honest one. Layla picked a small star that had the courage to be small. She drew a line from it to the lantern's reflection in her cup, and from the reflection to the reed, and from the reed to the space above her sternum where breaths begin. A map, but not on paper. Path, but not for feet. In the palace, The storyteller paused to sip water so the words could stay soft. The king's head tilted against a cushion that had become his friend. A guard outside the door shifted weight from one leg to the other and found, to his surprise, that both felt the same. Back under the stars, Layla lay down and let the sand take the shape of her. Sable set the lantern near her shoulder. Enough light to say you're not alone. Not enough to be asked to do more. The old leader lifted his eyes to gauge the sky's temperature and decided the night had no fever. A young camel sighed and turned its head until it found a better nothing to look at. Before sleep, Sable whispered, "Say the wish that needs no sound." Layla didn't move her mouth. Her wish moved anyway, slow, sure, the way a tide moves beneath boats that think they are still. The lantern understood and glowed the way a listener glows when they're trusted with something they'll never repeat. The desert breathed out. The market dreamed its soft dream of closing again tomorrow. The river, patient as always, rehearsed the morning light. And the night, gentle, steady, unafraid, grew softer. Let your own shoulders learn from the dunes. Let your jaw forget its job. Let your hands be heavier than your thoughts. In slower, again as if the compass were watching and agreeing. The lantern bows without smoke. The stars write nothing that must be read tonight. The reed remembers your breath even when you set it down. And the night grows softer. The stars were ready, not loud, just present. The old caravan leader looked up and nodded. "We can see without trying," he said. That was their signal. They rose like people standing from a soft rug. No rush, no scrape. Layla lifted the lantern. Sable dimmed it a little more, so it drew a circle just big enough for feet to find their next place. Wind chimes hung from the saddles, each bell wrapped in a strip of cloth. They did not ring. They breathed, a hush with edges. The compass rested in Layla's hand. It turned, slow as a thought that likes you, toward the open sand. The blue thread slipped from her satchel and curled across the map, drawing a pale line no pen could have made. The line did not argue with the dunes. It agreed with them. They walked. Sand accepted them and gave them back. Camels pressed small moons in the surface and moved on. The sky lowered its voice. Sable began to hum. One note, warm, low. A sound just above silence. The kind you feel more than hear. The wrapped bells answered with something softer than sound. And the night grew softer. "Listen to the desert breathe," the leader said. They paused on a long slope that remembered the sun. Layla knelt and pressed her palm to the sand. Heat drifted out like a sigh leaving a crowded room. She lowered her ear. A faint pulse. Not a rhythm you count. A rhythm you join. "The dunes breathe out at night," Sable murmured. "They let go of the day. So can we." Layla breathed with the sand. In slower. The compass settled, pleased. The blue thread brightened a shade and drew a gentle curve around the foot of the dune. A path of least asking. A young herder walked beside them, keeping time with his own quiet. He wore a bell at his wrist wrapped in felt. When he forgot and lifted his arm too quickly, it gave one soft note, then remembered. He smiled an apology to the night. The night forgave him before he finished smiling. They passed a low outcrop of stone. Wind gathered in its hollows and laid itself down. The old leader raised a hand. "Stop a moment." They stood in the lee of the rock and listened to air choosing where to be. No listen, only presence. The map at Layla's hip grew a little heavier. She unrolled it. The blue thread had drawn small dots where they had paused without discussing it. Breath marks. The silver pin warmed and cooled, as if to say, "You marked enough for now." A woman near the front of the line tightened the wraps on the chimes. Her hands moved with a craftsperson's patience. "Chimes are like stories," she said without looking up. "They mean well. At night they mean less. So we teach them how to be quiet." She knotted the cloth and patted each bell as if thanking it for trying. Sable's hum drifted over the caravan and came back to them changed, the way a note changes when it folds into wide air. The camels lengthened their steps. The dunes loosened their shoulders. Layla felt her ribs answer the same way. They walked until the sky tipped a bowl of cooler dark over their heads. The leader pointed to a low ridge ahead. Beyond that, the sand thins. The map draws itself more quickly there. He said it with no awe. It was simply how the desert did its work. Layla tasted the air. A hint of salt. A hint of stone that had known water in other years. The compass leaned toward it and then, politely, waited for her breath. She gave it another slow exhale. It turned another hair's width. A fox crossed their path and did not increase its speed. It looked at Sable as if remembering a tiny favor from a very long time ago. Sable dipped its head. The fox changed its mind and changed it back and disappeared into the thought of a shadow. They reached the ridge. The leader lifted his palm again. They paused, then climbed single file. At the top, the desert opened. The sand grew flatter. The sky grew wider. The sound of their steps spread out and lay down. Here, the leader said, "The map likes to help." Layla unrolled her paper. The blue thread slid across it with no hand to guide it. It traced a slow river of blankness that matched the path before them. It left a small space unmarked, as if saving room for something that wasn't a road. "What is the empty part?" Layla asked. "A place to let your name be quiet," Sable said. "Every journey needs a space where you are not asked to be yourself so hard." Layla nodded. She did not label the space. She left it empty on purpose. They moved again. The rap chimes gave a low consent. A child sleeping across a saddle side and returned to a dream that didn't require plot. A water skin clicked softly against another and apologized after the fact. A short while later they came upon a marker half buried. A ring of stones gathered by travelers who liked round things. In the middle, a shallow well held night within it. Not much water. Enough. The surface showed a small, perfect sky. They circled the well. One by one they cupped a sip. No talk. Only hands and water, and the quiet noise a throat makes when it agrees. Layla saw the stars tremble on the surface as her breath touched it. She waited until the tremble settled. Then she drank. The silver pin warmed. Well, she marked it tiny, careful. "Hum the water's note," Sable whispered. Layla set the reed between her fingers and let air thread through it, soft as a fingertip on silk. The note matched the well almost. She eased it lower until the surface stilled again. The caravan stood still with her, as if one person. And the night grew softer. They left the ring of stones as they found it. Quiet, useful, unlabeled. Over the next rise, the scent of salt pressed a little closer. The compass faced it like a flower faces the morning it trusts. "Will we reach the shore tonight?" Layla asked. No, the leader said, kind and certain. "Tonight is for learning the walk that reaches it." The shore likes people who do not rush. They chose a camp that did not mind being chosen. A hollow beside a pale dune. A floor of hard-packed sand ready to hold rugs. Wind that came by to say hello and stayed to watch, not to talk. They set the lantern at the camp center. Its light made a small village of knees and hands. Sable touched the glass and the flame shrank to a calm the size of a steady heart. "Night watch," the leader said. 2 by 2. Not to guard. To listen. He paired people who softened each other. The eager with the slow, the careful with the easy. He nodded to Layla. "You and the bells," he said, meaning the woman who wrapped them. They sat together on a rug at the edge of the camp. The wrapped bells rested on a folded cloth between them. The woman lifted one bell and unwrapped it halfway. "Listen to the difference," she whispered. She touched the mouth with one finger. The bell sighed, a sound with no ambition. She covered it again. Silence with a memory. "Why bells?" Layla asked. "So I can hear when I'm hurrying," the woman said. "If I move too fast, they tell me I forgot the cloth. They don't scold. They remind." Layla breathed through the reed in her mind. She felt her shoulders soften a notch she didn't know they had. The compass lay on the rug between them, unstressed, useful even while it rested. Across the camp, the leader poured tea into small cups with thick lips to keep spills polite. He brought one to Layla and one to the bellwoman. "It knows the way to the mouth," he said, smiling, then drifted away so they could keep listening. They shared the cup. Tea tasted of the well and of the hands that had carried it and of the hour that didn't need more from them. Sable hummed again, a shade lower. The hum traveled through the camels like a lullaby built of patience. They folded their legs with gratitude and went heavy in the right places. A young one leaned its head against an older one and let sleep arrive first. Layla opened the map to see what the blue thread had done while they sat. A thin line had appeared from the well to a small sketch the thread had made by itself. A shape like a curl, like a bay, like a half-closed eye. Not the sea yet. The idea of the sea. She smiled. Soon, she whispered, not as a promise to reach it, but as a promise to let it take the time it wanted. The apples in her satchel shifted. The apple of rest made itself known by doing nothing. She placed her hand on the satchel's flap. That's enough, she told the day, and the day believed her. They traded watches. Layla lay down on a rug warm with other people's rest. She tucked the reed near her collarbone and let breath choose the pace. The lantern's light thinned to a thread. Sable nested by the glass door and watched the flame be small and brave at the same time. Half asleep, Layla heard the desert breathe again. A slow exhale. Sand giving back the day. Stars telling each other short stories. Nothing asked of her. Everything allowed. She drifted to the edge of sleep and hovered there. Welcome. The hum, the bells, the low talk of water under sand. They braided into one long yes. And the night grew softer. When it was her turn to sit again, the sky had swung a little. A different cluster stood above the ridge. She counted 3 of them by breath. 1 in, 2 out, 3 rest. Sable watched her count and said nothing, which felt like the perfect kind of company. The compass slept face down. The blue thread lay slack, a line waiting for morning. Before dawn, Sable whispered at last, let the map draw one more thing. It touched the edge of the paper with a fingertip of light. A small door appeared near the curl of the future bay. Not a door in a wall. A door in a day. What opens it? Layla asked. An exhale, Sable said. Only when you're ready. She nodded and put the map away. Her hands remembered the weight of sleep and asked for it. She lay back and let the sand shape itself to her again. The way a friend shapes their schedule to yours without making a speech about it. The last watch ended. The lantern smiled without brightening. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the air changed color by a finger's width. Not dawn yet. The idea of dawn. Let your own breath find that edge. Not yet awake. Not quite asleep. A balanced place. In slow. Slower. Leave room between thoughts wide enough to walk through. The desert will keep the night safe until morning finds it. The bells will rest and remember how to be almost silent. The map will wait, patient as paper, sure as thread. And the night grows softer. The edge of night loosened. Not sunrise yet. The idea of it. Cool air, a hint of salt, a softer wind. The caravan folded its rugs with the care you give to letters you plan to reread. Sable touched the lantern glass. The flame steadied, small as a secret kept kindly. Layla unrolled the map. Near the curl the thread had drawn, a tiny door waited. Not a door in a wall, a door in a day. Open it the way you promised, Sable whispered. She breathed out, longer than her thoughts expected. The ink shimmered. The drawn door widened until it was simply the path ahead. Sand easing to packed earth. Earth easing to shore. The compass nodded the way paper nods when it knows where to point. They walked the last dunes as if stepping through a dream they'd already forgiven for fading. The air grew round with salt. The wind learned the language of water. Low cliffs lifted their patient shoulders. And beyond, a bay opened. A half-closed eye, calm and awake. The sea here did not rush to tell them anything. It breathed. It received. It offered back. Islands lay like sleeping animals just offshore, backs breaking the surface in slow hills. Between them, the water held a rhythm you could mistake for silence if you didn't love it. Listen for the whales, the leader said, voice lower than the surf. They sleep near the surface when the night agrees. Layla stood at the margin where sand decides to be wet. The cold slipped around her ankles and left its cool bracelet. Far out, a dark curve rolled and settled, then rolled again, slower. A soft, hollow sigh followed, the kind of breath ships respect. Not one, but several. each rise unhurried, each exhale a cloud that dissolved before it learned to be a shape. The bay's skin barely wrinkled with the sight of them. The world, for a long, kind minute, forgot to count. Sable lowered the lantern to the sand. It lit the shore in a circle no wider than 2 long steps. Everything beyond that circle belonged to the whales and the morning that hadn't started yet. "Is this the place?" Layla asked. "The place that keeps time," Sable said. "Watch the water at your feet." She did. The small incoming pieces of sea touched her toes, retreated, returned, like a pulse finding the finger that wants to feel it. Not perfect, not even true. A woman in a reed boat slid close to shore and let the tide lay her boat down gently. She wore a shawl the color of unbleached linen and a face that had learned long ago how to match the sea's patience. She raised a palm in greeting without raising her voice. "Keeper?" the leader asked. "Only a listener," she said with a smile. "I roll the nets before they think of catching. I ask questions softly enough that whales keep sleeping." She stepped into the shallows and the water welcomed her with the first wave and forgot her with the second. Layla nodded. "I'd like to learn to keep time," she said. "You already do," the woman replied. "You breathe, don't you?" She bent, lifted a flat stone the size of her open hand, and held it so the water could mark it with dark. "This bay gives a second gift to anyone who stands here long enough to change their mind." She placed the stone in Layla's palm. "It's only a stone, but hold it, and you'll feel the tide inside it. Keeps time like a heartbeat, not for clocks, for people." Layla closed her fingers. At first, only a weight. Then, as the foam threaded around her ankles and slipped back, a tiny lean, a subtle tug, as if the stone remembered the moon. Her own pulse answered. Slower, deeper, companions. "The tide will not match your breath," the woman said gently. "Your breath can learn from it." Layla breathed with the bay. In when the water climbed her skin. Out when it left. No counting. Only meeting. The compass lay against her wrist and relaxed like a bird that has decided the branch is trustworthy. Sable watched the whales. One lifted its back just enough to show a pale crescent. A scar or a story. It lay still again, keeping half a watch the way some beings do when sleep and duty share a blanket. "Why do they sleep here?" Layla whispered. "Because here," the listener said, "nothing asks them to be impressive." She looked to the islands. Between those 2 rocks, the current cradles. The waves approach with manners. The bay refuses arguments. Her smile widened a breath. "We try to keep it that way." They walked along the wet sand where small shells wrote quick alphabets and erased themselves. Every few steps, the stone in Layla's hand leaned a breath sooner than the water reached her. "A lesson without a lecture." "Lantern lesson," Sable murmured. "Some rhythms are older than your worry. When you can't find your own, borrow theirs." Layla nodded. She placed her free hand on her sternum. Palm over tide, stone over pulse. The 2 beats spoke quietly until they preferred speaking together. The caravan kept respectful distance. Camels drank from a dune-fed trickle upstream. The bellwoman unwrapped one bell completely and held it above the foam. A wave touched metal. The bell gave a single deep note and decided to be quiet for the rest of the morning. On the nearest island, black-backed birds stood and did not improve anything. A line of light along the horizon considered appearing and chose not to yet. The whales slept, vast, sure, unconcerned with being seen. Their breath rose. Their breath returned. The bay answered and forgot it had answered. "Would you like to hear the tide without the sea?" the listener asked. She knelt and filled a small clay vial with bay water, sealed it with beeswax, and tied it with grass. She handed it to Sable. For the lantern, Sable opened the little door and set the vial inside. Near the flame but not too near. The glass responded, a faint, patient musicless movement. The flame leaned to greet it. The lantern's light found a slower cadence, like reading to a beloved who has already fallen asleep but needs you to keep going. "This is yours," the woman said to Layla. "Not the vial. The timing. Take it inland. It will still be true." Layla glanced at the map. The blue thread had drawn a small symbol at the bay's lip, a curled line with a dot. Water paused, heart speaking. She didn't label it. She memorized the feeling instead. They walked to a drift of logs where the sea leaves its wooden stories. Layla sat, Sable perched on the rounded end of a beam that had traveled farther than any person here. The stone in Layla's palm kept its quiet tug. A gull tilted its head and chose not to complain about anything. I used to draw maps like orders, Layla said. Lines that insisted, arrows that argued. I think I'd like to draw tides now. Places where things are allowed to return. Sable smiled, the soft smile of a teacher whose student found their own word. That map will never finish, it said. Perfect. Far out. One whale rose higher than before. Lifting a part of itself, the water hugged intimately. It breathed a pillar of silver mist that caught the almost sun and made a small, private rainbow. The whale settled. The rainbow did not brag about having existed. Another gift? Layla asked, looking at Sable. Gifts come in threes, Sable said.
Vefeye metu.
Counted on tiny fingers. 1, the compass that points to quiet. 2, the tide that keeps time like a heartbeat. It held up the third finger and lowered it again. Not yet. The third waits where rain remembers how to be kind. The listener laughed softly. Then you'll leave when the bay exhales, she said. Travel on the outbreath. Let beginnings borrow endings. They waited, not staring, not planning. When the water at Layla's feet retreated a finger's width farther than it had, and the stone in her palm followed the moon across some distance only it understood, she rose. The caravan rose with her. The bay seemed to nod. You may go. You know how to come back. Before you do, the listener added, choose a word you won't say aloud today. Layla thought. She chose hurry. She tucked it behind her tongue and it dissolved there like salt on skin. They walked the sand that was deciding to be dry again. The bellwoman rapped her bell. The leader lifted one hand toward the islands, a promise to keep not much. Sable secured the little tide inside the lantern, where its presence would slow the flame's breath to something a weary room could believe. At the shore's edge, the compass faced inland and waited for Layla's chest to agree. She inhaled with what remained of the night. She exhaled with what approached of the day. The needle turned, not to north, not to away, to the path that held both sea salt and dust. They climbed the low track between grasses that had memorized wind. Behind them, the bay lay its long palm over the whales and did not wake them to say goodbye. Ahead, the dunes made room. Close your eyes, Sable whispered as they reached the first rise. Keep walking. Let the tide walk you. She did. Her steps found the slow measure the water had taught. Her shoulders remembered the bay. Her jaw honored the word she had chosen not to speak. The stone beat quietly, a pocket moon. When she opened her eyes, the desert was not different. She was, which is often enough. They paused at the ridge to look back one last time. The islands were only darker patches on a wide softness, a breathing skin, a sleep that had chosen to trust the surface. Thank you, Layla said, barely above thinking. The sea, expert at receiving gratitude it did not require, tucked the thanks somewhere it might need on another morning. The caravan turned inland. The map's blue thread uncurled from the bay and sketched a new line toward the interior. Not straight, not crooked, the kind of line you draw with your eyes closed when you're sure of your feet. Keep the tide near your heart, the listener called from the beach. You'll know when you've matched it. People near you will breathe easier without knowing why. Layla touched the stone. Sable touched the lantern. The small vial inside moved without moving. A private moon pulled a private sea. The flame bowed, content. They walked until the sound of the surf became a memory with edges made round by distance. The dunes welcomed their return as if the sea had loaned them out and expected them back in good condition. Tell me the lesson, Sable said softly. Layla smiled. That I can be led by what returns, she said. That leaving and coming back can be the same motion if the rhythm is kind. She paused. And that my maps can hold tides. Good, Sable breathed. Let them. The old leader came level with them, his pace easy as a story without villains. Did you hear the whales? He asked. I heard their sleep, Layla said. Then you heard enough, he replied. They made camp in a shallow bowl of sand that remembered being cool in the mornings. The sun, still shy, painted the edge of the world with a brush it had washed many times. Layla set the lantern down. Sable dimmed it to a thought. Rest a little, the leader said. Between sea and sand is a good place to keep a short sleep. People lay where the ground offered itself. Bells rapped. Rugs opened. Breaths found each other and agreed. Layla placed the stone over her heart and closed her eyes. The tide inside it kept time, slow and certain. Her ribs answered without effort. The map beside her shoulder curled its edge the way paper curls when it's content with the air. Somewhere very far behind them, a whale surfaced and exhaled a pillar of light. Somewhere very near, Sable hummed a line that matched the stone. Somewhere exactly here, Layla rested without needing to fall asleep to prove it. Let your own breathing meet the slow pull that lives under everything. Nothing to count, nothing to hold. In with the tide you can't see, out with the tide you can feel. Shoulders lower, jaw on hooks. Hands remember the weight of being yours. The stone keeps time. The lantern keeps company. The sea keeps its promises in ways you don't need to witness. And the night, even as morning thinks about arriving, grows softer. Morning thought about arriving and decided to wait. Cloud, So, the caravan rose without speeches. Rugs shook once. Bells stayed wrapped. The flame settled. Layla held the stone over her heart. It leaned in a way that said, "Turn toward water you can walk through." The compass agreed, not with a point, but with a patient tilt. The blue thread crossed the map and drew a line the color of a quiet promise. They followed a track that remembered rain. Grass bowed. Air sweetened. The wind traded salt for green. The city did not announce itself. It appeared the way sleep appears, by becoming the only reasonable thing. Blue tiles, everywhere, on domes, on steps, on courtyard walls, not shouting their color, offering it. Fountains spoke in low voices. Bread ovens exhaled. Doors wore small brass knockers shaped like leaves that had nothing to prove. People moved at a pace that respected umbrellas and each other. Children counted drops on their sleeves and one every time. The market kept its roof on and its volume down. Steam rose from cups and chose not to travel far. Sable smiled. "This is the city of gentle rain," it said. "It waters roofs and tempers thoughts, keeps its thunder in the distance, like a drum outside the tent." Layla stepped onto a blue-tiled square that had been warmed by bread and cooled by weather so many times it knew how to hold both. Rain freckled her shawl. She breathed in wet stone, anise, mint, warm flour. She breathed out, and the breath left her with a kindness she didn't have to earn. "Listen," Sable whispered. A baker slid a round of bread from an oven's mouth. When the loaf landed on the cloth, it made a sound like a comfortable yes. He brushed the top with water so the crust would shine without bragging. He tore a piece and offered it. Palm up, no hurry. Layla tasted it. Heat, sesame, the exact amount of effort a morning should require. Her shoulders lowered a fraction she hadn't noticed they were holding. The silver pin warmed bread. She marked the margin of her map with a dot and a small curve that meant welcome. They moved along an arcade lined with shallow pools. Coins did not splash here. They were placed, thumb and forefinger, pressed to the water and released. The pool answered with a circle that never raised its voice. A fountain keeper leaned on a broom as if it were a cane he didn't need. He nodded at Sable as if greeting an old colleague who specialized in soft light. "Keymaker's Lane is just ahead," he said, voice low enough not to interrupt the stone. "Keymaker?" Layla asked. "Keys for rooms that don't have doors," he said, smiling. "For locks that hide behind the breath. If you need one, you'll know." They found the lane by the sound of rain politely asking to slide from tile to gutter. A sign carved into cedar read, "Keys and other openings." Below it, smaller letters, "We listen first." The shop itself was a long pocket of warmth. Racks held keys in shapes the hand understood before the eye did. Crescent, leaf, river bend, lullaby. Behind the counter stood a woman with rain in her hair and patience in her hands. She wore an apron marked by years of metal dust and tea stains.
No spectacle.
No measuring tools they could see. Only attention. What do you need to open? She asked, not unkindly. Layla thought of gates, doors, chests, then let them pass. Her palm found the stone. Her ribs remembered the tide. I think I need to open only when I exhale, she said, surprised by her own answer. If I try with effort, I close. If I let go, I enter. The keymaker's eyes warmed like bread. Good, she said. She set a shallow tray between them and tapped it once with her fingertip. Breathe onto this. Layla leaned. In slow. Out slower. Her breath fogged the tray's glass, then cleared, then fogged again. The keymaker watched the rhythm, not the size, not the strength. She nodded, as if a melody had resolved. She reached beneath the counter and brought out a small block of brass the color of a rainy afternoon. With a file and a patience learned from water, she shaped it while the rain kept time. No hurry. Edges softened. Teeth formed, not jagged, curved, like ripples meeting. When she finished, the key looked like a drop that had decided to be useful. Third gift, Sable murmured, pleased. The key that opens when you exhale. The keymaker placed it on Layla's palm. It won't turn if you hold your breath, she said. It won't force a thing that doesn't want you. It's for doorways that are mostly in your chest, and for a few in the world that understand chests. Layla tried it in the air. Not a twist, a release. The key turned with a feeling like a knot loosening. Her jaw relaxed without being asked. Care, the keymaker added, not as a warning, as a kindness. If you rush, it will feel like nothing. If you soften, it will remind you what opens. Layla set the key next to the compass. The two rested together as if they'd sat side by side for years. The stone in her pocket answered with a tiny, patient heartbeat. Lantern lesson, Sable said. Some doors open when you lean. Some open when you stop leaning. Know which is which. They left the shop. Rain stitched small silver threads between eaves. The blue tiles brightened the way faces brighten when they've just been understood. They crossed a bridge so low the river barely admitted it. Below, water slid under stone with the sound of silk being folded. Along the far bank, ovens sent up plumes that smelled like late breakfast and early kindness. Women in shawls wiped benches dry and then sat, as if the act of wiping had been the invitation they'd been waiting for. Sit, Sable said. Let the rain show you how to be here. They sat on a bench under a fig tree that had chosen to be generous. Leaves caught drops and offered them later, smaller, more personal. Layla set the map on her lap. The blue thread drew a shape she hadn't seen before. 3 box courtyards connected by a narrow hall. Each courtyard held a small symbol. A circle, a line, a door. What are these? She asked. The rooms of enough, Sable said. They're not elsewhere. They're in you. But this city built sisters to remind you. They walked the lane until they reached a small wooden door set into a wall that did not care to be grand. No sign. Only a brass plate worn by hands that had knocked gently. Layla raised her knuckles, then remembered the keymaker's words. She placed her palm on the wood. The key turned in her hand without finding a keyhole. The wood answered by becoming a passage. Inside, 3 courtyards waited, one after the other, each with a different way to rest. In the first, a circle of cushions and a fountain so small it was almost pretending. A note on the wall. Sit until your shoulders agree. No one counted. No one watched. Layla sat. Her shoulders agreed. In the second, a long bench facing a garden of green things that valued rain more than praise. A note. Leave one thing undone. Layla opened her satchel, took out a pencil, and did not sharpen it. She smiled at the perfectly reasonable act of not finishing. In the third, a plain wall painted the blue of shallow water. No note, only space. Sable dimmed the lantern to a breath. Layla stood before the wall and exhaled. The wall softened. It did not break. It did not disappear. It became what walls sometimes are at their best. Permission to stop. She touched the wall with her open hand. It was cool and it held. Behind her, the rain chose larger drops and then, as if deciding not to wake a sleeping child, shrank them again. The apples in her satchel shifted. She took out the second one. Forgiveness. It looked ready. She bit, slower than hunger. A soft bite, a clean swallow. Her tongue found the sweetness that had been waiting since the market at dusk. She put the core in her palm and breathed on it. The key turned. Something in her chest made room. A small bell rang somewhere in the building, the kind of bell that announces tea but not guests. A woman appeared with 2 cups and a plate of warm bread torn into calm pieces. She said nothing. She left them and left. They dipped the bread into oil that had known sunlight and decided to be soft about it. They ate until the plate was no longer crowded. They left one piece. The note from the second courtyard had followed them in its heart. When they stepped back into the lane, the rain had thinned to a polite thought. The city glowed the way blue does after being touched by water and time. Children floated paper boats in a gutter and cheered without volume when a boat turned a corner without tipping. A dog shook once and then decided against a second shake because the first had been enough. Layla lifted the compass. The needle swayed and settled toward an old gate at the far end of a tiled avenue. The stone in her pocket kept its quiet tide. The key lay against the compass, warm as a known hand. "Before we go," Sable said, "another lantern lesson." It set the lantern on a step and opened the small door. Inside, the vial of bay water rested. The flame leaned toward it as if listening to a familiar bedtime story. "Rain above, tide within," Sable murmured. "One teaches you to soften from the outside in, the other from the inside out. Between them, doors know what to do." Layla nodded. Her throat felt as open as a wide street with no carts on it. Her breath wasn't trying to be impressive. It didn't have to be. They passed the baker again. He offered another small piece and a smile he kept in a jar by the oven door. Layla left a coin and then a second coin and then remembered the bellwoman's words and left the third on the counter with a note that said, "For the cat who keeps the flower company." Some kindnesses required imagination. This city had plenty. At the gate, a guard who looked relieved to have easy work lifted the latch for them. "Road holds puddles but no trouble," he said. "Step in the shallow ones on purpose. Convinces the day you're not afraid." Layla stepped in a shallow one and felt the cool enter her sandal and become a small, private joke with her own foot. The compass welcomed the humor and tipped toward the open country. The blue thread unrolled across the map and drew a soft line away from the city, leaving behind a tiny tile where the rooms of enough lived without rent. As they walked, roofs behind them made a sound like polite applause as drops fell in their own time. Fountains resumed small conversations. A child waved with both hands and then remembered to wave smaller. The city did not mind being left. It had taught what it came to teach. "Say what you learned," Sable asked as the rain thinned to air. "That some doors open when I let breath go," Layla said. "That bread taught me a pace. That blue holds rain better than I thought. That I can leave one thing undone and still be whole." "Good," Sable said. "Keep one square empty on every map." "I promised," Layla replied. "I will." They followed the road out, feet damp, heart steady. The sky brightened without feeling the need to be dramatic. The dunes ahead lifted, still remembering sea. Behind them, the city of gentle rain set another loaf in the oven and counted nothing. In the palace, the storyteller paused to drink. Her voice returned, lower. The king's breath, once stubborn, now moved like rain over tile. Steady, kind, content to continue. A servant closed a window against a breeze that had already done its good work. The lantern by the storyteller's hand kept small company with the flame inside it. Layla placed the new key in the pocket over her heart, beside the stone. One beat, one release. The compass turned, not to north, not to away, to a path that would lead back to the river, forward to the dunes, onward to whatever opens when a person remembers how to exhale. Let your own breath find the key's rhythm. In just enough, out a little longer. Feel how the jaw forgets to hold. Feel how the chest forgets to armor. Let the shoulders take the lesson from blue tile and lie flat. Keep one thing undone. Let one door be a wall for today. Open the one in your ribs with nothing but air. The vial keeps the tide. The key keeps the promise. The lantern keeps the gentle light. And the night, even as the rain gives you back the sky, grows softer. They left the rain behind the way you leave a kind room, with thanks so soft the walls keep it. The sky cleared its throat and decided to be blue. Not loud, just true. Layla tucked the key over her heart, beside the stone that kept tide. The compass rode her palm without insisting. The blue thread unrolled across the map in a line that felt like coming home. They walked, dunes remembering sea, wind with clean pockets, footsteps that didn't argue with the ground. By afternoon, the river's smell found them first. Green, metal, old coins, fresh bread. Then the low roofs, then the quay, then the steps where a brass pot had once kept company with steam. The fisherman was there. Different day, same patience. His wool cap looked like a nap that had gone well. You learned the tide, he said, not as a question. I did, Layla smiled. It taught me to follow what returns. He poured tea that knew how to pour itself. They held the cups with both hands, the way you hold a small animal that already trusts you. Sable set the lantern down where the river could see its own face in the glass. Inside, the little vial of bay water shifted without moving. The flame listened and slowed. Show me the compass, the fisherman said. Layla opened her palm. The needle turned toward the market's end-of-day breath, then hesitated, then settled on the water, near the steps where reeds wrote in cursive. Points to quiet, she said. And today he nodded, quiet points to you. He dipped a wooden cup, tipped it so the surface trembled, then waited without blinking until it stilled. Return your hush to the place you got it? Layla touched the cloth envelope the stall keeper had given her. Hush long enough to sleep through a storm, short enough to hear your name. The envelope was warm from being believed in. I'll visit him, she said. They walked the quay. The market was closing the way a good book closes. Slowly, with a breath between the last line and the cover. Bells under cloth. Fruit diminished to the right amount. A broom that had learned to be quiet years ago. The sign still hung crooked by design. Stories traded here. Underneath, smaller, noise accepted, hush given. The stall keeper looked up, smile already made. Did the hush fit? It did, Layla said, and set the envelope on the counter the way you return a borrowed coat that kept you dry. I brought a thank you. He didn't reach for the coins he could see. He raised a finger toward the corner shelf. The noise jar waited there. Empty-looking, quietly heavy, labeled with 3 careful letters. Listen, he said. He opened the lid. Layla heard nothing at first. Then, as if hearing is a muscle that remembers how to be used, a thread of sound uncurled. The old urge to answer everything, to be quick, to be perfect. Thin, still alive. Not angry anymore. More like a habit waiting for a job it no longer had. She breathed in. She breathed out longer. The key over her heart turned without touching a lock. The sound thinned to honesty and then to nothing. Do you want it back? The stall keeper asked, gentle. No, Layla said, Kinder. I want it to rest. She placed 1 coin, then a second, then, remembering the cat, a third. For your tea, she said. For your patience. For the shelf that knows what to hold. He nodded, accepted the coins not as payment but as participation. Tell the lantern thank you for keeping the size of the room, he added, eyes smiling past her shoulder. Sable bowed, small and pleased. They climbed the steps into the courtyard of the fig tree. The cinnamon dog dozed in the same spot, which is one of the best things a spot can be. The fountain kept its quiet paragraph going and did not mind if anyone read it. Layla took out the last apple, rest. It had waited a long time without being impatient. She turned it in her hands. Rain had kissed its skin back in the blue tile city. Sand had admired it in the dunes. The river approved. She took 1 slow bite. No listen, just sweetness. She set the core beside the map and let the moment mark itself. Now, Sable said, let's keep a promise. The lantern's flame gave a small nod, as if remembering an appointment with the moon. They left the market to its soft mathematics. They crossed streets that knew them and streets that pretended not to for the pleasure of being introduced again. Past the bakery, where a last loaf cooled like a minor sun. Past the blue door that always forgave hands. At the palace, evening had already entered and removed its shoes. Guards stood with nothing dramatic to guard. They recognized the storyteller by the way the lantern chose her hand. They stepped aside with the kind of bow that belongs to a peace well earned. The highest room waited. Its windows held the river's slow coin. The king sat where a weary person sits when he has learned not to apologize for being weary. The crown rested on the table, not as a refusal, as a choice. A cushion had become his friend. The storyteller set the lantern on the sill so the city could share. Her voice was already where it needed to be, lower than worry, higher than sleep. "Your Majesty," she said, but her tone made the title feel like a first name spoken kindly. Layla learned the third gift in a city where rain knows how to be gentle. She carries a key that turns when she lets go, a stone that keeps tide, a compass that points to quiet. She came back by way of the market that ends well. The king's breath lengthened. The room listened without moving its furniture. And now, the storyteller continued, "She returns here, where you sit, and where the lantern waits to tell you the part it saved for last." Sable stood inside the lantern, a small figure surrounded by warm glass and tiny tides. It opened the little door as if letting in a friend the room already liked. "Lantern secret," it said, almost not saying it. "The flame doesn't run on oil alone. It runs on what people put down when they're ready. Every exhale you've offered tonight, a drop of that keeps the light. Every small kindness you didn't report to anyone, a thread of that wicks the flame." The king looked at the light with different eyes. It did feel familiar now. A gathered glow made of things he thought he had lost by letting them go. "The lantern," Sable went on, "is a mirror for quiet. It brightens only as much as the room can hold. It dims itself to match your shoulders. It remembers the tide for you when you forget. It does not chase sleep. It makes room." Layla stepped forward and placed the stone, wrapped in a corner of her scarf, near the lantern's base. The glass answered. A slow, steady lean, a rhythm that would not ask the body to do anything difficult. She set the compass beside it. The needle considered the king, then turned toward the window where the city breathed like a friendly animal. She touched the key. In a quiet click in the air, the door in a chest opening without a door. The room changed the way a face changes when it stops trying to be brave and just is. The air cooled by a half-degree of effort. Someone at the door shifted weight and discovered there was nothing to shift. A curtain forgot to move and was beautiful in stillness. "Breathe with the bay you didn't see," the storyteller said, voice slow. "In when the water touches your feet. Out when it leaves. Let the reed in your mind draw the line for you. Let the bells stay wrapped. Let the map keep one square empty." She didn't ask him to close his eyes. She didn't ask him to think of anything. She told the next small piece of Layla's road in sentences that understood the bed, the long day, the heavy crown set aside. Layla returned to the quay, she said. She found the fisherman tying not a knot but a loop, something that holds as long as you're gentle. She marked the well and the courtyard and the door that opens when you exhale. Then she did the bravest thing a mapmaker can do. She stopped drawing for a while. The king's hands softened one finger at a time. A line between his eyes relaxed like a gate after rain. He breathed, the kind of breath that reorders rooms without moving a chair. Sable dimmed the flame a thumb width. The lantern didn't get darker. It got closer. "The secret has another part," Sable whispered, almost a smile, as if confiding in the night itself. "Every lantern like me keeps a small ember that isn't mine. When someone matches the room, when breath and flame and tide agree, a grain of that agreement stays. We carry it to the next room that needs it." Which is to say, it looked at the king the way a river looks at a bridge that has been kind to it. "You are already helping someone you don't know yet fall asleep tomorrow." The king's mouth moved, not a word, a change. Gratitude without audience. Permission without decree. Layla set her map on the table near the crown. The blue thread lay slack, content. She left one square empty and wrote nothing in it. The empty square felt full. "Will you finish the story?" Sable asked the storyteller, though it already knew. In a quiet way, the storyteller nodded. She told how the caravan chose watches not to guard, but to listen. How the Rain City taught doors to be walls when needed and openings when invited. how the bay refused arguments and the whales slept with a trust that made the morning more likely. And when Layla stood in the highest room, she said, her voice the same depth as the lantern, she didn't fix anything. She didn't try to earn sleep. She placed a stone near a light, a compass near a window, a key near a chest. Then she breathed the way dunes breathe, and the night grew softer. The king's eyes closed the way gates close at the very end of evening. No clank, no announcement. He was not taken by sleep. He was met by it. He didn't notice the moment the meeting happened, which is the nicest way for a good thing to happen. Around him, the city listened. Rooftops lowered their voices. Cats approved without paperwork. The river spent its coin and received it back, endlessly kind to both acts. The storyteller watched for a while, not to be sure, only to honor the room. Sable held the door of the lantern barely open, so the tide could whisper to the flame like an old friend talking about nothing important. Layla stepped to the window. The fisherman below tied a loop and untied it and smiled at the number of times he'd learned to be gentle. The bellwoman slept. The stall-keeper arranged 3 coins on a tray and decided in his sleep which one belonged to the cat. The lantern's secret worked quietly, as all good secrets do when they prefer being true to being dramatic. Sable closed the little door. The flame stayed low. The tide inside kept time for the room without asking the room to notice. Before we go, the storyteller murmured to no one in particular, a last lantern lesson for tonight. Her voice was already almost a breath. Not every wish needs sound, she said. You can wish by putting your hand flat on the bed, by letting your jaw forget its job, by leaving one thing undone. The lantern hears that language. So does sleep. The king did not answer. His answering was happening. The storyteller lifted the lantern from the sill. It weighed less than before in her hand. It always did after a room had learned something. They stepped out, closing the door with the careful kindness people use when there is someone asleep on the other side. Walk with them a few steps. Let your own breath match a tide you didn't know you kept. Feel the key turn without a lock. Feel the compass prefer the path that doesn't need you to be quick. Hands heavier, jaw easy, shoulders like dunes after heat. The lantern remembers you. The room thanks you without words. The city hums at a volume your ribs can agree with. And the night grows softer. They walk down the quiet hall. Sandals on Kurtai, somewhere AG. The king slept. The room kept. The lantern carried a new ease. Outside, the city waited like a friend who knows not to ask questions late. Sable, another ember for 2. They went down the steps. The night air was min. The river slee. There, Layla asked. Oh, they found the fisherman at his usual place, the brass pot small over a flame that respected sleep. He didn't speak. Ash, still. They drank standing, then sitting, then letting the sitting become a kind of leaning. Nothing to save. Layla set the compass on the step between them. The needle D. Good, the fisherman said, voice almost inside the steam. It knows when home. She touched the stone in her pocket. It answered why. Shabilop. Inside the little. They walked the quay, not to arrive anywhere, simply to say goodbye to the kind surfaces of the day. The B, 3 coins S. The fig tree made lace. The co. At the crooked sign, story, the stall-keeper had left A. A note beneath, hush returned. L. They crossed the last narrow lane before the river. Launder. A window. Some. Layla's door opened with the key that turned on an exhale. No click. Permissio. Her room welcomed her by being exactly as she left it, only kinder. The blue thread rested. BL. Sable stood in the lantern doorway, not inside, not outside. Let's tid. They did in the way you tidy a thought, not by moving, by letting it stand with less company. Layla unrolled the map one last time. She did not add a Lee. She put a phi. Room F. She cradled the reed. One slow breath out, so. Enough to tell the bow. Enough to tell the rue. Sable touched the glass. The fla. Not. Almost. Lantern lesson, it murmured, the last of the night. Good endings. Layla smiled. She loosened tea. She let the day st. On the windowsill, 3 apple seeds dried from earlier, small commas where a sentence had decided to breathe. She pressed them either a. The city leaned against the river leaned. The Sable's voice found the lowest shelf. If you want,
elle.
let your own bed be a lantern circle. Let the pill, put bot, feel how he. If thoughts arrive, give them cups of mint tea and smaller chairs. Tell them the story they will loo. Breathe in just enough to know you did. Breathe out longer and again. No only ret. If you kept one thing undone today, let it be your badge. If you finished more tea. If you lay the key where your ribs rise and fall. Lay the st. It will keep. Lay tea. Tony. Sable's hum lowers one shade more. The color of sleep behind the eyelids. The lantern. The arrow. The blanket becomes the sea. Somewhere, whales roll in their safe water without waking.
Somewhere, belle.
Somewhere a blue till. Here you are a body in a good place. A map a door that a lantern that runs If sleep comes now, let it. If it if it tiptoes, if it sits at you have earned this quiet. You don't. It holds you. The flame bows once. The reed remembers without sound. The seed in the hands heavier, jaw easy. Enough. The lantern dims to almost nothing. The night finishes, and the night, the good, wide, forgiving night, grows softer.